Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome. I am delighted to have in our studio Lorenzo Bellamy of Bellamy Genn. He is one of the named partners of a leading government relations firm in Annapolis, and we are here to talk about the upcoming Maryland legislative session. So welcome, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's good to see you, and it's good to be back on your podcast. Once again, a whole year has passed, and we get to talk about the new 2026 Maryland General Assembly legislative session.
Yes, and I feel like
exciting.
Well, you know, when we talked last year, like everything was shifting and changing. No one, because we were thinking, well, what's happening with the Trump administration and so forth. And now it feels like somebody took that deck of cards in Maryland and just threw it up in the air.
What?
And we're figuring where all the pieces are. So we're recording this the Friday before session starts, and the session's going to start January 14th. We'll get to see each other again at the Ion Annapolis Summit that the Daily Record hosts.
7:30 in the morning.
We'll be there bright and early.
Yes.
And in full disclosure, Lorenzo and I work together because he represents the Daily Record. And so we intersect on a lot of advocacy for news media. But of course, you work with a lot of other clients. So tell me, let's just for our listeners who are not really like attuned to what's happening in Annapolis, let's kind of run down that list of changes. We've got a new speaker, we've got new committee chairs, we've got, you name it, lots of things going on. So tell us about the environment. What are people stepping into?
Well, Rebecca, first of all, thank you again for this opportunity and for your listeners. Again, my name is Lorenzo Bellamy, and I am the owner of the Bellamy Genn Group. And we are a government relations firm based in Annapolis and been in business as a firm since 2017, but I've been, and my partner, Genn, we've been lobbying for many, many years. And but 2017 is when we formed this firm. So almost, it'll be coming 10 years pretty soon. And so we're excited to be doing work here in Annapolis and in Washington, D.C. as well. So to answer your question about what's happening, you thought there were changes last session. There have been some significant changes this session. And I have to tell you, some historic and monumental changes. So the first big change is Adrienne Jones, who was the first African-American woman to be Speaker of the House of Delegates, resigned her position. She is still a delegate, but she is no longer the Speaker. The House of Delegates then were in a position to have to elect someone from their group as the new Speaker. And Jocelyn Pena Melnick is the new Speaker of the House of Delegates. She is a Dominican American. I want to just say I was born in the Dominican Republic, so we have
yay! Little hometown pride.
Little DR relationship there, but she is she is excellent. She was the former chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee, and now she is the boss of the House of Delegates. And I'll speak for myself, very excited to see her. She's bringing a different energy, different emphasis. She is promised to work with the other side, across the aisle. I read an article where she is going to be working with the Rural Caucus, which are primarily Republicans, and I believe she has made a commitment to meet on a weekly basis with the Rural Caucus and with the minority whip and the minority leader. And so that's a good sign that she's willing to reach across the aisle. She's a consensus builder, and so we expect some good things with her. She has made some significant changes that are fitting to her agenda to be, one, very proactive and progressive, at the same time using strong relationships, folks who have extreme knowledge in the specific subject matters. And so that is reflected in her choice of committee chairs and vice chairs and other leadership, subcommittee chairs, et cetera, all the way from top to bottom, including who she's put on these various committees. She's also done something different this year where she's formed another committee. So the Health and Government Operations Committee has now been split into two committees. One is the um, um, Health Committee, and the other is the government, I call it GLEE, it's the Government Labor and Elections Committee. So those are so she's maybe one more E added to it, or maybe GLEC, you know, if you had to see,
I think Glee's, that'll be fun. That's going
you
to
know,
take the world by storm.
the GLEE Club, right?
Exactly. Because
So,
and I think she's really smart to do that because HGO was such a like mishmash of issues.
yeah.
Health and then the government operations was really tough there. So
So
we now have a
procurement
new
issues
committee.
are going to move. New head of, so where a lot of your members engage in, at least on the House side, which is the Judiciary Committee,
Right.
that is seeing a major overhaul as well. So we have a new chair, who was the former vice chair, Sandy Bartlett. She's now the chair of Judiciary, and a delegate who used to be on Judiciary but went to a different committee is now back in Judiciary, Delegate Deb Davis, as the vice chair.
Mhm.
And you have new subcommittee chairs. And for our issues, the estates and trust issues, Delegate Elizabeth Embry, who we are all very familiar with, is the chair of that subcommittee. And so,
Right.
no significant changes per se on judiciary, except obviously leadership, which is, I imagine, is big, but not unknown to members and not unknown to the General Assembly, because they both had served on that committee. Currently, with as vice chair for Sandy Bartlett, and as a former member with Deb Davis. So the familiarity with the issues, et cetera, will be there, and so that's
Mhm.
exciting. Um, the other committees have top leadership, top to bottom, and membership as well. So it's going to be an exciting year. I think what's making it a little bit of a challenge is that these are new committee chairs. They'll probably have new staff. They're going to have to get to know. It's one thing to be a member of a committee. It's another thing to be a vice chair of a committee. It's now you're the committee chair. Dynamics change a little bit. Your posture has to change a little bit, even though um, many of them that I've talked to have said, "Hey, what you saw before and who I am before is who I was before is who I am going to be on in leadership. So that won't change." Which brings a breath of assurance for many of us, especially with the new speaker, who has indicated on several occasions in her welcoming speech and on different platforms where she's been talking, she is open. She gave out her cell number. She wants people to talk to her, to bring issues to her. We can talk a little bit more about that. But if she has gone around and has met with leadership to in the House to tell them about their positions and what she expects of them. And I think this is going to be she's a change agent. She's a hard
Mhm.
worker. She she was telling people that she's in the office early in the morning and out late at night, and
Yeah.
she's a learner.
She's a committed
Well,
dynamo. And
she's
what I really appreciate about Speaker Penny Melnick is that emphasis on consensus and working across the table. Like when
yep,
we've had issues, she has been unequivocal about meet with the other side. You
yep,
guys hammer it out. We don't It's not that she's reluctant to take a stand or make a decision, but she wants advocates to really think through what is going to work best,
yeah,
and bring the most solid choices. So
yeah.
I think it'll be a really interesting way to go. I wanted to ask you about the new Glee committee because Melissa Wells is uh, is is the new chair, has not been a chair before,
No.
and a lot of press issues. Obviously, we went to HGO, Health Government Operations, for the government operations side, not for the health side.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of press issues will go in elections, often touch on journalism issues, not directly, but oftentimes in election disclosure or campaign finance. So like rules of how we engage. Also, government transparency will fall under this,
Yep.
maybe even more than they do under judiciary.
Correct.
Times were we were in HGO all the time. So tell us
Mhm.
what do you think about how this committee is forming? Because it's brand new.
It is
I'm
brand
sure
new.
even, uh, bill drafting is having a confusion about where to put bills, and maybe that's one of the reasons we
Yeah,
haven't seen any of those bills come out yet.
the pre-file bills have not been publicized yet. Normally, the Friday before session, you would start to see some of them. We haven't seen them yet. So they're probably overwhelmed and maybe, I don't know if they're confused or they're just trying to get marching orders to where these bills will go. You're absolutely right about the new chair, Melissa Wells from Baltimore City. She did chair the Baltimore City House delegation. So she has
Mhm.
that experience, under her belt as well. But you're right, brand new chair to this committee. Ken Kerr, who is a veteran of the committee, at least of HGO, is now the vice chair of that committee. So between Melissa and Ken Kerr, Delegate Wells and Delegate Kerr, I think they'll do a fantastic job, even with this new committee and their new portfolio of government, labor, and elections. And just like HGO was broken into subcommittees, this committee is also broken into subcommittees. And so for election law, for example, it's Delegate Chris Fair. For government operations and ethics, a familiar name and a veteran of the committee, Ken Kerr. And then
Mhm.
local government, if any of our issues touch local government or by county issues, that is going to go to Mayor Lehman from Prince George's County. So we are looking forward to, I think she's going to make sure that I say Prince George's County. I believe she is. Um,
So while you're checking on that, let's think about, we've talked a little bit about the House side, but there's not as much change on the Senate side, but I do feel like there's tension a little bit between the
for sure.
governor's office and the Senate, just around redistricting, and there's some change in the Senate. So tell us a little bit about what's going on Senate side, and then are there really frosty relations between I mean, it's hard to be frosty, all
Yeah.
Democrats, but
Well,
redistricting is a big issue.
the redistricting issue was a big issue. First of all, I think that, the governor, there were a lot of, they had a special session, as you know, and
Mhm,
the legislature came in and they overrode most of the governor's bills, including the data center study bill. The big one was the reparations bill. And they did not address redistricting. There was some backlash on the redistricting commission that apparently met without um, letting many people know. There was some debate whether or not it violated the Opens Meetings Act, but the fact that they had this meeting, vote was taken, and basically they are asking the public to provide input into what they think the maps, the redistricting map should look like. Um,
mhm,
it's been a little quiet on that issue, to be honest with you. We haven't heard too much. I think with all the shifts that are happening in the House, with Steny Hoyer retiring,
right.
um, I think you haven't heard too much from the governor's office about that. He did announce major money for public safety and law enforcement yesterday. About 124 million, I believe, is what he's allocating for that. Crime is going down in Maryland, and so I guess there's an opportunity. He's looking at it holistically, so community partners as well will be funded and served. So it's an approach that he believes will continue to see a reduction in crime and also take care of law enforcement. The redistricting thing is not going to go away. The Maryland congressional delegation has all come out basically and said that they support, even if it means one additional member to the congressional delegation. Given what's happening at the national federal level, even one is symbolic and also potentially, if it's that close, could even be mathematically necessary. So,
Mhm,
um, and I think the majority of Marylanders do support this kind of redistricting issue, even though a lot of them are saying that it could be considered unfair, or that it's just not time to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And that, what does one vote mean in Congress for Maryland? Little bitty Maryland, strong but powerful Maryland, gets one extra member. So it's open for debate. Like I said, I haven't heard too much about that recently. More importantly, is the governor is presenting a limited package of legislation this session, housing being a big one. Vaccination, I think he announced yesterday, is another one. We're giving local hospitals and local health authorities more say and oversight over vaccinations, notwithstanding what
mhm,
the government has done. Um, you're probably going to see things related to AI. You mentioned that earlier about AI in our previous
right.
conversation, and so I think that's going to come up as well. The big issue, obviously, is a 1.5 billion, 1.4. I guess who's counting a couple hundred million here, but a 1.5, 1.4 billion dollar deficit. that they're going to have to address. And the question is, how do you do that? Where do you where do you raise revenue? Where do you find potential cuts? Um, how do you do that without raising taxes, which he said he would not do? Um,
Right.
I
And
think,
just to let's put it in perspective, because last session, so in 2025, the legislature was facing a $3
yeah,
billion with a B deficit. Now we're looking at like half that, 1.4, 1.5 billion.
yeah,
That's still a little rich for my pocketbook, but that's maybe that calculus changes a little bit. If you can't raise taxes, and the governor is putting out some significant spending in some of his initiatives, that does seem like there's some tension to get to the required balanced budget. Maryland's a state that requires
correct.
its budget to balance.
No, I was talking to a couple of legislators the last few days and just about an hour ago today, and asked a question about taxes and budget, and they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk about cuts. I mentioned the bad word cuts, and they said no, we don't want to talk about that. We're going to take care of the most vulnerable in Maryland, and we're going to the fact that they have been able to come back each year with a balanced budget, constitutionally they're required, that they will do it again this year. And you're
Mhm.
right. 1.5, 1.4 is a lot less than three, but it's still pretty significant. So it'd be interesting to see where the revenues come from, especially since we're looking at potentially losing a lot of revenue because of what's happened with federal government laying off or firing, shutting down government agencies like USAID. The revenue for certain counties like Prince George's County are going to suffer significantly. Montgomery County as well, and Anne Arundel, where a lot of former federal employees live, and so there's stress on them, and that's going to put stress on those particular counties, which then means stress on the state. So it'll be interesting to see where those revenues come from, and you know, if there will be fees as opposed to taxes. And I know we talked about that in our pre-conversation. And so that's something to watch out for, right? I mean, we have to just be aware that sometimes we will call things may look like taxes, but they're called fees, but they could be construed by many as taxes, and vice versa.
Right.
So that's something to watch out for. Um, Again, I don't know, I have the answers as to where the revenue is going to come from. People have a lot of ideas. They've mentioned data centers. They've mentioned, other potential revenue enhancements for the state that could have an immediate impact or could have an impact in out years. So we'll see. It will be a challenge, but I think Maryland is very smart legislators and very smart executive, and they will find a way. And we as lobbyists and consultants and clients and vendors and community folks and residents of the state will be there to try to find ways as well, with less pain obviously to the residents of Maryland.
No, absolutely. And so actually, I wanted to go back to, I haven't forgotten about the Senate. I want to talk about that. But before we get there, I feel like, and I don't know if like in the history of Maryland this has ever happened, but it's really unusual for the former speaker to just go back and be a delegate. We're coming off of Mike Bush, who, essentially died in office. So what's there doesn't seem to be a game plan. I mean, that seems like a really interesting role for now, Delegate Jones to be playing, to just go back to General Pop in
Yeah.
that way. What do you think? How's
Yeah,
that going to
that's
work?
so I can't speculate or guess or look into the heart and mind of Delegate Jones and her ultimate decision to step down. I think it's encouraging that she wants to remain as a delegate and continue to serve the constituents of in Baltimore County in her district, and I think that's a formidable thing for her to do. I think it's a very good ramp for her to do. She's been assigned to the Appropriations Committee, which
Mhm.
no, she was head of the Capital Budget Subcommittee when she was, before she became Speaker. So she's very familiar with the budget issues, and so having her back in appropriations, I think, is appropriate. No play on words there, but I think and we have seen delegates who have been chairs or vice chairs of committee who have moved on to be, who have their positions have been, uh, let's see, what's a good word? They've transitioned back to membership in their particular committee or another committee, and that has happened. It has happened. We're seeing it now, and that will potentially cause some changes later on, where people may decide, it's been a nice however many years they've been a delegate or senator, and they may decide to pursue other ventures. And they may have asked, I don't know, some of them may have even asked um, that they be moved to a different particular committee and no longer want leadership because all that brings. So I can't speculate on the minds and hearts of those individuals, but I think for Delegate Jones, former speaker, being put in the appropriations committee, I think is fine. And I
It's a
think that
perfect spot for her.
it's a good spot. When I looked at the other committees, I'm thinking, no, that made perfect sense.
Hmm. And she's so supportive. I mean, I think her tenure as speaker has really been one of lifting other legislators up
Absolutely.
and providing opportunity. And so I feel like she's it just is a little odd. It hasn't really happened on that level in Maryland for a long time. Um, so let's pop back to the Senate. Is there anything that we should be looking for or thinking about in the Senate right now?
There's been one, two movements in the Senate. So Senator Malcolm Augustine, who used to be on the Triple E committee, the education, let's see, education, energy, and
Energy, education, and
environment, environment.
environment. Yes.
Yeah. So he is no longer on that committee. He is now on budget and tax,
Mm,
which is going to be. I saw his event was tonight, and that's who I was with. And I asked, I said, great timing, right? You go from all the issues on environment and energy, and now they put you over in budget and tax with all the issues with budget and tax. But Senator Gazzoni, who is the chair of the committee, is very happy to have him as a member of his committee. Senator Augustine remains as Senator pro tem. So when the Senate president is unavailable to be Senate president and preside over the Senate, Senator Augustine would be would be the acting incoming sort of Senate president. He's the president pro tem, so he would serve in his stead. Um, and then we had a delegate, Kevin Harris, who now is a
mhm.
senator, and he is now over in the Triple E committee. So he took essentially like a swap, almost a swap. Um, I am there are some rumors, so I don't want to like fuel any rumors, but there are rumors that maybe one legislator may be senator may be retiring or resigning. I'm not sure before session starts, which is only in a couple of days. Um, so we'll see how that pans out. I think we'll see maybe one or two more movements in the Senate and potentially a few movements in the House even before this all comes to a conclusion by um by the beginning of session on Wednesday.
Well, and certainly my own senator, District 41, Dahlia Tarr, is facing some real troubles, and so that and she also sits on Triple E, which is where many of our press issues go. So that's a committee that may see even more changes coming up. So we will all be watching and waiting to see what happens in all of those areas.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about some of those big issue areas that are coming up. So we talked a little bit about data centers.
Yeah.
And when I think of data centers, I think of energy because I'm thinking BGE and rate hikes. And I also am thinking AI. So um, so those pieces, and then of course housing. The governor has a big initiative around housing, health,
Mhm.
and then also I'm interested about how all this workforce development piece is fitting in. Um, so those are sort of gubernatorially focused pieces of legislation. But what else is going to be a big sort of crux, or what else is going to be a big topic that's going to move?
I think so you mentioned housing, which is one of his top priorities, and I think that's going to be that may dominate the space for a while. Budget obviously is something that's going to dominate, but they have to come up. The conclusion of the budget deliberations is that they have to come out with a balanced budget, so that will eventually pan itself out. Um, there's been a lot of discussion both at the national level and state level about AI, and I think if I'm correct on the Trump administration, I think they may have basically said the states. I don't know if it was an executive order or not. You may know better than I do, Rebecca, but apparently there was some discussion about states not having as much control or say over AI regulations in their respective states. I don't think that's going to stop Maryland legislators from trying to come up with guidelines and guardrails around AI. And there are several legislators, both from the House and Senate, that are looking at that. So we'll see. We saw some AI bills last session. Expect to see more this session, given what's happening at the national level. Um, the data
Well,
center
and
thing,
that's just
yeah,
to interject in there. So AI is such an important issue for news media because we've seen as AI proliferates, and it kind of blew my mind. I was doing a strategic planning session back in the fall and realizing, gosh, when we did the same exercise a year before, AI was not even really on our radar.
well,
It was just so it's all happened so
yeah,
quickly, and publishers have seen traffic just fall off a cliff to their own sites because of the AI generated overviews. So
yeah.
it really has been an economic hit. And so what news media is really looking for is transparency in those language learning models to get reparations is the wrong word, but get recompense from AI companies who have used our content to build their models. And
Not
so that
only,
is something.
yeah, not only have they used your content, I've seen some of the AI's platforms and software where, and I guess this is a good thing, that they actually have given credit to the source, right? They've identified or cited the source that they're getting the information. I've seen like a little footnote or clips. I don't know if you've seen that on some of the, maybe on,
Right, which is all sweet, but we want some money on that
I
too,
got
because
you.
that's,
I got you.
nobody's just generating content for free.
No.
Um, so
Well, they
that
need to
is
hear from you. The legislature, if they come up with bills that deal with that issue, whether it's at the national level or at state level, I think having an active membership in your association, I think, is going to be important for them to communicate that. One thing I wanted to say about just all this change in new leadership, one thing that the Peña has said is that she wants to hear, and all the legislators that I've heard from, whether they're brand new or have been around for a while, they want to hear from their constituents. They want to hear from the experts. They want to hear from folks who have ideas, creative ideas about how to address some of these issues, whether it be revenue generating projects or AI guardrails, you name it. They want to hear from you, from the experts and from constituents that are directly or indirectly impacted. So, um, yeah, your comment about the AI remuneration, I think, is important.
we're going to be watching it for sure because it is, it's such a huge issue. But and we could wax poetic for that for a while. And I do want to come back to how people get more involved and how they make their voices heard. But you talked a little bit before we got on about data centers, and
Yeah,
so just the cost of data centers. So that could be a great revenue opportunity for the state, but it can also, if it then turns into massive rate hikes for energy and electricity, that some of that revenue sort of gets counterbalanced. So, what do you think has there been any sort of discussion or talk about rates and data centers and things of that nature?
Everybody's talking about data centers in terms of revenue enhancement, but also the downside that they see related to energy costs, noise, aesthetics. Not in my backyard, all that, job creation. So you have pros and cons on and arguments on both sides. Virginia, it's my understanding, from what you read in the press and what people have testified to, they didn't initially roll their data center projects out too well and caused a lot of problems. They actually built some of them in next to $1 million homes, things like that. So there's been some issues in Virginia. But Maryland can learn, I think, lessons from Virginia, and
Sure.
there are data centers in some of the other counties, like I think Frederick County may have one or two. Um, don't quote me on that because I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I know Frederick County has data centers, and there's probably more to come. But I think there needs to be necessary, probably guardrails to address some of these concerns that a lot of the residents and constituents have. Now, I think the data center companies probably need to do a better job at educating the general public about what these things do, about the noise, about the environmental consequences or not. I think there's an issue about, you mentioned, increased utility bills because of the amount of energy that these data centers will require. Well, that may be true. I was talking to somebody who has knowledge about these data centers and energy, was telling me that the energy, the utility bills are going to go up whether the data centers are in Maryland or not, because Maryland is part of the PJM, and so they are going to potentially have rate increases because of the support of other data centers in other jurisdictions outside of
So
Maryland.
it's a regional grid. Just what's the PJM? What does that stand for?
Oh gosh, I knew you were
Oh,
going to
I'm
ask.
sorry. That was the ringer of a question. I was just trying to I was channeling Senator Kagan, who always in testimony is like, "Don't use an acronym."
I know
So
people know it, but it's the regional.
withdrawn, but it's the regional
Yes,
grid
yes.
basically. So Maryland
Well, I
doesn't
know
live in
somebody's
us.
going to see this and they're going to be like, "Gosh, Bellamy, you didn't know what PJ." And it's like, oh, I'm having a. Um, but yeah, and I guess the question is, because data centers are here and more to come, where does Maryland want to be when this thing, really hits the fan? And other jurisdictions, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, all of the surrounding states are basically saying, we're looking to bring data centers into our communities because they know about the revenue that those things generate. In addition to revenue, we're talking about job creation, continuing to maintain those centers, which will mean jobs for a long, long time. But there are pros and cons to everything, and just like some of the other environmental energy projects that are going on in Maryland, people have legitimate concerns, and I think
Sure.
um, the responses need to be legitimate and transparent as well. I think that's happening, and so we'll see how it pans out with the legislature. I know, and various county bodies as well.
Well, and so I think that gets back to the idea that there are pros and cons to everything, and people need to speak their truth and say what is important to them. And I do feel like in times of change, especially with everything sort of in flux in the legislature, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's this unstable, craziness, but there is change. And so I think that offers an opportunity for voices to be heard
Mhm.
if they're speaking out. And so let's talk a little bit about, sort of advocacy 101. If you're sort of just walking off the street, like I, how do you suggest that people get involved in this kind of discourse?
So before I answer that question, let me just do a correction here on the PJM and answer what that means. So, thank God for the internet. So it's the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland Regional Transmission Organization. So that's what that does. That's what that is. So Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland.
Thank you. Because I was thinking there was the compact all up and down the Northeast states. And I was like, but that wasn't PJM. So thank you. Now we're all centered.
They operate in many other states, but that's the regional. That's the grid.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So you heard it here first. PJM, the regional grid, covers Maryland.
Now to advocacy. Well, let me get back to my screen here. There you are. So advocacy 101. I mean, I would tell folks, never be afraid to reach out to your legislators. First, find out who they are in your particular district. As a lobbyist consultant, yes, we may have the information. Yes, we have the access because we're on the ground, and that's fine. And they trust us and believe us with the information that we are trying to share based on our position for our clients. Constituents have a different role and get a different benefit because they are constituents for that particular legislator, meaning they're voters, and the legislatures in the end are going to listen to and want to make sure that they get reelected and that they address the issues of their constituents, which is what they were elected to do. So um, I always tell people, if you have grassroots organizations, if you have opportunity to write letters, email, nobody's writing too much, right? But email, um, phone calls, using social media to get your point across or to express, your opinion. They listen. They are very, very sensitive. There are many legislators who are very sensitive. We've seen the reactions to grassroots, to constituent advocacy using different mediums like social media, TikTok or Instagram, Facebook. Um, those are all mediums that they are tracking and watching, and this new generation that's using them, I think it's very effective, and that goes across the board. Whether you're new to it or inexperienced in it, still use it or call them. They do track calls or email them. That's going to be very important. I was at an event today where there were some constituents, and a lot of the lobbyists were around the legislator, but the legislator was very interested in knowing what the constituent had to say, and I think
Right.
that shows importance. So advocacy 101, you as a constituent need to know who your legislators are and reach out to them. Like I said, they actually want to hear from you if you have ideas for them. I mean, a lot of bills are generated from a constituent that had a concern and an issue that impacted many other people. And that legislator was like, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm putting a bill in to address that issue that I know will help you address your issues, but it overall will address many others as well. And so I'm putting that in. So you'll see some bills like that that are constituency driven.
Well, and I think also Maryland, there's always things that could be done better in every state, but I think Maryland's General Assembly website is pretty strong in terms of making sure that information is available.
Yeah,
And
you can test. You can. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to. My light bulb is going off here. They can submit written testimony. They can sign up for oral testimony if they want to make the trip down to Annapolis. But there's also the opportunity to testify, and I don't know exactly how they're going to do it this year. It's been pretty consistent since COVID. You can testify through a video link live if you're unable to make it down to Annapolis. But you can sign up to testify, and they do appreciate hearing from constituents. And like I said, following up with letter writing campaigns and the like. So yeah, I'm 100% in favor of how Maryland and welcome how Maryland does it. I think they're doing a good job. I've heard from other states and lobbyists in other states, and it's Maryland. We are definitely in the top 5 states and jurisdictions in the country that actually are very transparent and opportunities for folks to weigh in.
And so if you search the Maryland General Assembly, you'll get to a website. You can look at all the different committees and the meetings, and you can see which bills have been introduced and so forth. If listeners are more interested in what's going on the journalism side, MDDC tracks, I monitor all the legislation in our various jurisdictions. So at our website, which is MDDC Press, so Mary David David Charlie Press.com/advocacy, you can see all the bills that we're tracking as priority bills. Now, granted, it's going to be a little slim on Maryland just yet because those bills haven't dropped yet. But you can see what we're monitoring throughout the whole session, and the bills that we're posting are bills that we're interested in, bills that we're probably going to weigh in on. And I think, Lorenzo, you're totally right. Like, you need to know who your legislators are, and I am always surprised at how many people don't know who their legislators are.
Yeah.
And so those are the people that essentially kind of work for you in the legislative process.
That's
And
correct.
so you have the most influence with the people that are your legislators. Now, just to kind of put a little cold dose of reality on that, the way a bill becomes law, it's introduced, it's heard in a committee, it may go to a subcommittee for massaging and working, it gets voted on by a committee. It then, if it's passed the committee, it goes to the full floor. So
Correct.
so knowing where your legislator is in that process is really helpful,
Yeah.
because you can have the most committed legislator ever, but if they don't sit on the committee that's hearing that bill, and that committee kills the bill or doesn't advance it to the next level, your legislator may never have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
That's correct.
So sort of understanding that process a little bit is super helpful.
Yeah.
And whatever your issue area is, there is an advocacy organization that will help you carry that message.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, like, for instance, the Press Association works in concert with a lot of different types of organizations. Oftentimes, we'll work with, on issues of government transparency, we'll work with organizations like Common Cause or the ACLU or the Public Justice Center, who have different spins on some of what they're trying to do, but we unite on some of those areas. We find ourselves, like when we work on anti-SLAPP legislation, we
Mhm.
might be working with advocates who are working to support domestic violence survivors, or all sorts of different people. Sometimes on business issues, we work with the chamber. So it's you just have to know who's going to be working on the things that are important to you, and work with them.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And there's a, on the Maryland website, General Assembly website, if you don't know who your representative is, there's a link where you can just put your address in and it'll tell you who your, if you put your address, zip code, it'll tell you who your legislator is. And that goes from member of Congress, all the way down to, your delegate and senator, state delegate and senator.
Yes, I have had to use Find My Legislator Maryland many a time.
And guess what? It's going to be even more needed now with all the changes. So yes. So
Absolutely. So, what else do you think we should know going into the session? I'm sure we'll be talking more about other things as the session develops, but heading in, we're less than a week away. What else do we need to know?
well, I can tell you, we're watching and looking out for just like any further movements, right? Changes in the General Assembly, like who. I mean, the speaker has put out her list of chairs and coach and vice chairs and members of the committees, but anything could change even between now and the first day of session. So we're watching that carefully. Not too much has happened on the Senate side, which makes me think that something will happen. And
Right.
what is that going to look like, and how do we pivot and mitigate any changes that could have a impact on the organization and members or anybody else. And so that's like the first thing we're watching. At least our firm, we're watching to see that, and also what bills are going to be, what bills have been pre-filed. Um, there's some curiosity as to will some bills that were originally in one committee now go to another committee because that original committee no longer has jurisdiction over that bill. Will it be if bills are jointly assigned? Which committees will the bills be jointly assigned to? Which will determine how we engage. Um, so I think that's going to be the issue initially in the beginning, and then I think more long term is what does the governor do? How does the governor address the budget deficit? Where are the revenues coming from? Where are some of the cuts coming from? I use that word loosely, and where are um, yeah, and how that's going to impact Maryland residents. And I think the government, first, and another thing, this is an election year, so it's going to be
Right.
they've got to do some things because everybody's watching, challengers are watching, and they will definitely use, naturally, will use anything that shows any kind of weakness or inability to fix the situation as something that they will use in their particular campaign. So incumbents are going to be very attuned to that. You've got a lot of folks who've been just appointed as delegates and legislators, and so that they don't have the history that some of these others have, and so they're going to be challenged, I'm sure, come June in the primary and potentially in the general election in November. So it'll be interesting to see how people position themselves during this session as they prepare for elections in June, which is right around the corner, right?
Right.
They adjourn April 13th, and then you have elections in June and the primary, and then the general in November. So not much runway for campaigning.
Well, and incumbents can't really be campaigning. They can't accept money. They can't do anything during the legislative session. So it really is a compressed once April 14th, or yeah, I guess once, midnight on April 14th, everything will break loose as
Yeah,
people scramble for that primary.
that's correct. That's correct.
Well, I am excited to jump in and get started, and of course, always delighted to work with you. You've been such a terrific advocate,
Thank you.
and it's so important for us to continue to work to strengthen news media and also
Yes.
just to tell our story to legislators. And that's honestly when I think of advocacy and lobbying, it really is telling a client or telling the perspective of a client to
Yes.
legislators. It's just really bringing their thoughts and ideas there because it can be complicated. People can't take time away from their business all the time to go down to Annapolis or even kind of like navigate it as easily. And so I feel really privileged to say, look, here's like I know what's happening in news media. Let me share my
Yep.
knowledge.
Yep.
And we're lucky in Maryland that for the most part, there are always challenges. Things could be better, but I do believe that the legislature and the governor really do believe in the power and the importance of news media.
Yeah.
So
Maryland,
proud to
we
be
are
both of them.
we are very fortunate in Maryland to have a great governor in Westmore and very fortunate to have a active legislature on both sides of the aisle that are committed to what they believe is best interest of their constituents in the state of Maryland. So I'm very fortunate and honored to be as a lobbyist here in Maryland to be part of that and watch that happen and to play whatever role I can play with our clients to get the message forward. And speaking of message, um, I was having a conversation with a friend and we were talking about Maryland's literacy rate, and actually not just Maryland, but the state, but mainly for the country, which goes to the messaging. How do you message legislators? So 44% of Americans read only at the sixth grade level.
Yikes.
Right? 44%. That's a huge number. So we've been telling all of our folks, hey, keep it simple when you're communicating, right? Uh,
Hmm.
one pagers, you know, not a lot of words. Colors help, charts
Right.
and arrows, because these folks are very busy. Not that they read, I'm sure, beyond the sixth grade level, but they don't have time. And so there's the shorter and simpler message that's in bold, colored, right in their face, that makes sense is the way to go. So that's my little spiel there on getting the
Simple,
message.
direct language. That is so critical. And also, I feel like if you can't simplify something down to its base points, you don't really understand it as well as you think you do.
Yeah,
So it's a good discipline. And it is, I think everyone feels me when I say it is so much easier to write a longer piece than it is a tight,
yeah.
concise, accurate piece. So, yes, I definitely understand. We'll take that into the session, thinking through simple, direct language, understanding our message, carrying it forward, and getting through.
Bring ideas to your members. They want to hear. The governor has said, come to me with solutions. I know the problems. I mean, they're obvious. He's like, come to me with some solutions. I have an open door. My staff, legislators, we have open doors to hear from our constituents, the experts, whatever, about what they think are some solutions to some of these issues that the state of Maryland is facing.
Yeah, and we have big issues, so we need big solutions. So I'm looking forward to seeing it develop over time. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming to join me again, Lorenzo, and I will see you soon.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well done. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.